Hello, this is Todd. I am coming out of St. Petersburg, Russia. I wanted to announce something that you may have seen in the news recently, which is that Russia will be offering their own version of the Golden Visa. For those of you who might not be familiar with Golden Visas, what these are is essentially citizenship in exchange for a financial investment into a country. We've seen these in places like Cyprus, Greece, etc. And the stipulations here are actually quite similar. What it would require is that an individual or business entity would have to invest at least 10 million rubles or around 135,000 US dollars at the current exchange rate. They would have to employ at least 10 individuals into an enterprise here. Or the other option is that an entity or individual could invest 30 million rubles into the government issued bonds here or into residential real estate. Either option offers tremendous possibilities. Right now the ruble has taken a bit of a dip and it's at a point now where it's relatively cheap, and I think for an enterprise they could actually kill two birds with one stone, you might say, in that they would have a chance at an arbitrage opportunity as well as being able to start a company in a scalable country into a country that is still a developing economy. So as far as a couple other things I should mention here is that Russia also announced that they will permit dual or multiple citizenship. So prior, if an individual wanted to take up Russian citizenship, they would have to renounce their prior citizenship, which is no longer required. Now, additionally, I mentioned the tax situation, and the tax situation is quite advantageous in that tech-based enterprises, it would only have to pay 3 or 4% taxes on their profits, so very low compared to most countries. And one other thing that I would mention is that the country right now is in a bit of an economic slump, and so for an entity that maybe wants to take advantage of the circumstances here, the cost of labor and other factors of this nature would also be quite reasonable. So for at least certain kinds of businesses, this offers significant possibilities, and of course there's probably more details that might come out as time goes on. Now, Russia is maybe not an ideal country for everyone, but I think for those who might be looking at a developing part of the world or a place that has more of a traditional conservative vibe, this is definitely a place to go. You'll find that there's a high regard, say, for family, for tradition. Now, of course, if you go into some of the bigger hubs like Moscow or here in St. Petersburg, you could say it does become a little more liberal, but even in areas that would be considered, say, more liberal, the people still would have more, I would say, traditional facing values for the most part. Sure, there might be certain things of the Western world that they generally orient more toward, but at the same time they still have high regard for the family and things like this. Now, Russia right now is a country that I think is pushing forward with a different sort of model than what you might find in the European Union or in some of the other Western countries, and I don't say this in a pejorative way. Russia is a country that is at the forefront of certain areas of the sciences, but it's also one that wants to hold on to traditions, and I think some of the core values that help make the country what it is today, which I have to applaud. Many countries are not willing to do this. They will simply sell out in the name of trying to achieve, like, say, financial success or trying to raise their GDP. They're willing to literally do anything to reach that point. Russia, of course, wants to try become a more and more prosperous society, but without completely selling out its country, which I personally applaud, coming from a country that essentially did the exact opposite. So I would definitely encourage anyone that might be interested in relocating abroad or setting up business. This is definitely a country worth considering. Of course, you might see in the news stories of business expropriations and things of this nature, but I would be very careful when looking at those because there's often two sides to a story, and What's important to consider here is that this is a country that is changing quite rapidly, and so maybe things that were a reality a few years ago are no longer.